Well, greetings, everybody. Welcome to another exciting lecture with Dr. Ronald J. Brown. Our topic today is Kwanzaa, a relatively new holiday dating from the 1960s that has joined the calendar of American holidays, ranging from 4th of July Independence, Christmas, to St. Patrick's Day, to Yom Kippur. We have an entire calendar of holidays in the United States. Holidays are powerful. Holidays have meaning. And so our topic for today is going to be to explore the power, the meaning, the history of one of the newer holidays to our calendar. And this is Kwanzaa. On the left, you see our outline, sort of an introduction to the power of holidays, why we have holidays. Why does every country, every religion, every ethnic group create a calendar of holidays? What's the reason for this? Then we will go back to the origins of Kwanzaa and the African American civil rights movement. And then number three, why did certain people think it was important to create a brand new holiday called Kwanzaa? Then the various activities of the week of Kwanzaa. It's not just one day, but it's an entire week. And then the gradual, slow process of having this new holiday recognized by social groups, religious groups, mayors of cities, states, and possibly even the federal government. No holiday just jumps to the top and becomes a national holiday. Goes through a long process. And this process was followed by every other holiday, whether we're talking about the 4th of July or Thanksgiving or May Day or Labor Day or Mother's Day. All holidays have a very complex and very often controversial history. So today we're going to discover the history of one holiday, and that is called Kwanzaa. Well, first and foremost, the power of holidays. If you're going to have a holiday, you can't just establish a holiday and forget about it. You have to equip the holiday with instruments to attract the people. Think of Mardi Gras in New Orleans. Well, I mean, one of the most popular holidays, local holidays in the state of Louisiana, and especially the city of New Orleans. It is fun and food, and we won't even go into everything else associated with alcohol and sex and wild dancing and everything else. But it is a successful holiday. If your holiday has no fun and food, people are not going to be attracted to it. And so Mardi Gras is the perfect example of a holiday attracting millions of people every year, filled with fun and food and entertainment and all kinds of riotous activities. Well, other holidays have the same thing. If you are talking about the feast and the holiday of Ramadan, celebrating the revelation of the Quran to the Prophet Muhammad, well, you fast during the day, but then in the evening you have a big meal. And at the end of the month, you have an even bigger meal where the kids get new clothes, they get gifts, the women get jewelry, the men go into debt. But still, for fun and food, for a holiday, this is what it is all about. Think of Christmas. Where would we be without Christmas cookies, candy canes, chocolate? Think of all the various fruit cakes that people threaten each other with. Every holiday has to have fun and food, whether it's religious, secular, social, ethnic, or whatever. Fun and food is what attracts people to celebrate this holiday. Now, some countries have ancient holidays celebrating the queen or the king's birthday going back 1,000 years. These are long established great holidays. Royal funerals are great holidays. I was recently in Thailand when King Rama the Ninth died, and his long, drawn out ceremony which lasted an entire year. Once again, these were national holidays. Now, why do nations have holidays? Because it unites the people. If you're in Britain, if you're an old Anglo-Saxon going back 2,000 years, or a new immigrant from India or Pakistan or Canada, you celebrate the holiday of the Queen's birthday and you feel 100% British. In Thailand, when the king died, even if you were anti-monarchy, you considered the king a corrupt old dictator who should be overthrown. But when the king dies and a new king is crowned, all of these divisions and hostilities are quieted while everybody mourns the loss of a king. Ethnic holidays. Everybody becomes Irish on St. Patrick's. This is one of the great holidays that unites Irish. And even if you're not Irish, you drink green beer and you put on a green t-shirt and you enjoy in the celebrations of St. Patrick's Day. On the right, you see the German Pfingsten holiday. All the Americans, the tens of millions of Americans like myself who claim German ethnic heritage, this is the day when you celebrate German beer, you celebrate German food, you celebrate German culture, language, and traditions. Below that, we see gay pride, when all of the gays and lesbians and everything else join in celebrating the sexual liberation of the country. Salute to Israel. All the Israelis and American Jews become proud to be a Jew, proud to support Israel. But every holiday can be controversial. When you have gay pride, well, you can be sure there are many people, Christians, Jews, Muslims, other people who are opposed to the gay lifestyle. And while the gays are marching up and down Fifth Avenue, they are protesting. When the Israelis and the Jews are marching up and down Fifth Avenue, you can be sure there are hundreds of thousands of refugee Palestinians, Muslims around the world protesting the genocide of the Palestinians by the Israelis. So on one hand, one group is united in support of the parade, but other people are united in opposition to the parade. So once again, holidays, parades have power. Parades and holidays are also educating moments. When we think of the Easter week among Christians and especially Catholics, you are literally assisting at the entrance of Jesus into Jerusalem, his proclamation of as the Messiah, his arrest by the Romans, his condemnation by the Jewish courts, and eventually his crucifixion, burial, and on Easter Sunday, Christians believe he was resurrected. So holidays recreate a story. They tell a story again. They are educational. The Jewish Passover. A young kid asks, why is this night different from all other nights? Well, generally, the oldest man present recounts the story of the Exodus, of the parting of the seas, the destruction of the Pharaoh's army, and the liberation of the Jews from Egypt. The holiday of Ramadan commemorates the revelation of the Quran from God to the angel Gabriel to the prophet who in turn wrote it down. The only book that claims to be written by God himself is the Quran. The Christian Bible, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, and Paul were written by people remembering what they remembered of the life and teachings of Jesus. The Jewish Bible, memories of wars and battles and events written by people like Isaiah and other writers of the biblical books. So holidays are educational. Holidays are needed. Think of the United States. You see George Washington here on the balcony of Federal Hall on Wall Street with Trinity Church in the background, taking the oath of office as the first president of the United States. Well, this new country needed holidays. Well, of course, the first obvious choice was the day back in 1776 on July 4th, when the 13 colonies declared independence. That was a logical choice. A new holiday for a new country. So the 4th of July became one of the very first American holidays. So if you are thinking of establishing a new country, declaring yourself a god, and establishing a new religion, you are going to need holidays. They're more than just fun. They are educational. They commemorate major events in the history of your new country or your new religion. So holidays have power. They are very important for every ethnic, racial, religious, national group. You must have holidays. Well, African Americans, as we all know, were brought over from Africa as slaves. Some 500,000 were brought to what became the United States. They were enslaved in all the 13 colonies. Eventually, the colonies of the North, from Pennsylvania and New Jersey northward, abolished slavery. But in the southern states, from Maryland south down to Georgia and then into the Midwest, retained slave labor as a central feature of their economy. Well, by the 1960s, there was a big movement. During the Civil War, the slaves had been liberated, but in the South, they still remained victims of Jim Crow laws, discrimination, persecution, segregation. And this was basically a form of new slavery, new oppression. But under the leadership of people such as Martin Luther King, but as well as Adam Clayton Powell, Elijah Muhammad, Malcolm X, and other civil rights leaders, African Americans began to demand their rights as an American. And this is called the civil rights movement. Civil rights means the right to vote, the right to live wherever you want to, the right to go to whatever school you want to. These are your civil rights. And so people like Martin Luther King began the civil rights movement. This movement is well known, whether it is books such as the two that you see on the screen, various documentaries, YouTube videos, pamphlets, full-length movies, all chronicle the rise of the American civil rights movement. It was a protest against restrictions on voting, literacy laws, land ownership laws were imposed on the southern states to keep African Americans from voting. Segregated restrooms, restaurants, hotels, benches in a park where one was clearly reserved for whites only and the other one for coloreds. Rosa Parks, we all know Rosa Parks, demanding the right to keep her seat in a bus. No matter how many white people got on, she had paid her fare. She was a citizen. She should have the right of equality on the interior of a city bus. Below that, we see a Black girl, the first Black going into an all-white school. Look at the hostility of the woman behind her, cursing at her. The policeman standing there doing absolutely nothing. Here again, these were stages in the civil rights movement. Right to vote, equality to use restrooms, waiting rooms, restaurants, hotels like everybody else, to sit in a bus, to attend a decent school, no matter what your background. In addition to demanding Black civil rights, many historians began to research history, discovering a whole chapter of African American events, personalities that had been totally ignored by historians. I remember when I was going to school, the only woman who we studied in American history was the woman who sewed the American flag, Betsy Ross, the only woman of any significance in American history when I was going to school. We studied nothing about Blacks other than that they were slaves in the South. We studied nothing about the Native Americans other than the white people were killing them, taking their lands, and the Indians were all savage pagans anyways. Well, it was the same thing with African Americans. They were slaves on the plantation, picking cotton, doing what they did. Of course, of no importance in American history. Well, part of the civil rights movement was this rediscovering of African Americans as part of American history. Even the books, such as the one on the left, African American History Reconsidered. They were not just slaves on the plantations, but some were getting an education, some were becoming important. And as the book by Harriet Jacobs said, even the lives of a slave were of interest. How did they survive? What was life like on a plantation? So there was a whole revolution in American history. What was the role of Blacks in American history, of Native Americans, of working class people, of poor people? So part of the civil rights movement was a rewriting of American history. Another aspect of the civil rights movement was the notion that Black is beautiful. Look at the picture in the right on the upper side. Black women were constantly being taught that their kinky, curly hair was not beautiful. So you should get these products and straighten your hair. Malcolm X, in his autobiography, describes in several pages the process that African Americans went through to mix a brew of lye and eggs and who knows what else to straighten their hair so they could look like a nice white girl. Well, the notion that black is beautiful is revolutionary because for centuries, blacks were taught that they were ugly. They should straighten their hair. They should lighten their skin to become as close as they can to white girls. Well, part of the civil rights movement was get rid of the skin whitening products, get rid of the hair straightening products and hair extenders to try to look like a white girl, and celebrate the fact that you are black, that you have the hair that God gave you. So this was part of the civil rights movement that we don't like to talk about because even today, most black women want to have straight hair. They want to have light skin. They'll have their lips and their nose fixed if they have enough money. But part of the civil rights movement was you are black, be proud. Black is beautiful. Another aspect of the civil rights movement was what we call affirmative action. These were special programs to get African Americans into good schools. Many schools had a quota. If you lived in a town and the town was 40% black, every school had to have at least 40% black students. We all know about busing, where white students from one neighborhood would be taken to a school in another neighborhood, and black students from the ghetto would be taken to the suburbs into a white school. This, of course, was extremely controversial. Many people opposed it. You had white flight from the cities. You had many white people who moved to private Christian schools so that they wouldn't have to sit in a classroom with African Americans. But this is clearly a recognition that for centuries, the state, the city, and even the federal government had underfunded African American schools and funded lavishly all white schools. So this was another injustice that the civil rights movement attempted to correct. Another aspect of the civil rights movement was the institution of periods when African Americans would be featured in the press, movies would be made, documentaries would be shown on television, celebrating famous African Americans. February became Black History Month. Until today, PBS has loads of films and documentaries on African Americans, political leaders, Oprah, television leaders, President Obama, the President Thurgood Marshall, the Judge Maya Angelou, the writer Martin Luther King, the religious leader. This was very important in restoring the pride of African Americans. They were not just slaves. They were not just living in ghettos in poverty, but there were many who were accomplishing great things in the world, and these should be highlighted. So the civil rights movement was multifaceted. It attempted to teach the American public about African Americans, It attempted to restore the pride of Africans, the study of African history, African American studies departments in universities, history of Africa taught in history departments. It was a major revolution in how the United States was viewing African Americans. This was central to the civil rights movement. Well, in addition to textbooks on African history, textbooks on famous Americans, television programs on African American history, a revolution in how women viewed themselves. Black is beautiful. The demand for the right to vote, the right to sit in a theater like everybody else, go to any restaurant they could afford. These were all aspects of the civil rights movement. But another very important part was the establishment of African American holidays, when the whole nation would celebrate the African American culture, history, and contributions. And this is the origin during the civil rights movement of the new holiday called Kwanzaa. Well, of course, it was a new holiday. So you needed textbooks. For example, Kwanzaa lesson for children, teaching them what is this new holiday? Why is it important? What is it all about? Why should you celebrate it? Here again, no holiday just sort of jumps onto the calendar fully formed. Think of the holiday of Thanksgiving. It was a local holiday in Boston celebrated by Puritans, and it was only hundreds of years later during the American Civil War that Abraham Lincoln decided to transform it into a national holiday celebrated by all Americans. So every holiday has a rather unique history. Christmas, very unique history. There's nothing in the Bible that Jesus was born on December 25th. And so many Protestants refuse to celebrate Christmas because they said it's not a biblical holiday. So where did the holiday come from? Well, back in the Roman times, after Jesus died, all the Romans were still pagans, and December 25th was their big holiday of Saturnalia, when everybody gave gifts, everybody celebrated the god Saturn, everybody was partying and drinking and having fun. Well, these poor Christian kids growing up said, why are we sitting at home doing nothing when everybody else is having fun? When I go to school, all the other kids have brand new clothes and I have nothing. So gradually the Christians decided, okay, well, we'll just pretend that Jesus was born on the night of December 24th. We'll turn it into a Christian holiday. Well, of course, today, nobody remembers this controversial history of the holiday of Christmas. But each holiday has its own unique origins. And Kwanzaa is part of the civil rights movement. Well, since everybody has a holiday, somebody among the African Americans had to decide, well, what is our holiday going to be? When is it going to be? How are we going to celebrate it? And so they started saying, well, the Christians have Christmas, which is not in the Bible, but it has all kinds of fun and food and traditions. Muslims have Ramadan. The Jews have Hanukkah. The Irish have St. Patrick's Day. So civil rights leaders started searching around and trying to decide, well, if we're going to create a new holiday, what's it going to be like? And so very seriously, they began to make plans for a new, unique African American holiday. Well, the person who was responsible for this new holiday is a guy called Ronald McKinley Everett from California. Well, he was very much into this Black is beautiful. Back to our origins in Africa. He even changed his name to something that sounded African, Maulana Karenga, became a university professor, and decided that he was going to develop a new holiday. Well, he had to have roots for the holiday. Every holiday has some roots. I mean, it has a history. It has to be rooted somewhere. So he had studied African history, and he discovered that the one place in Africa where no slaves came from was the east coast of Africa on the Indian Ocean. All the other slaves in the Americas came from the west coast of Africa, from Angola up to Senegal. So he decided that the east coast, where no slaves came from, would be a place that all African Americans could identify with. If he would have chosen a tradition from Angola, the slaves from Congo or Senegal would have been upset. And so he decided, well, I'm going to go to a place in East Africa where no slaves came from. But yet it's Africa, and yet they are Black people. So he chose the civilization of Swahili. On the map, you can see the east coast of Africa from Mogadishu, Mombasa, Zanzibar, Kilwa, down to Madagascar. This was a part of Africa strongly influenced by Islam. North of that, you see Mecca and Medina and Cairo and Alexandria, the heartland of the Muslim world. Well, Muslim traders had gone down there and traded. They had settled. And during the 12, 13, 1400s, there had been a great Swahili culture. They had built giant forts of stone on the coast. They had converted to Islam. They had writing. They had literature. And it was a very highly developed African civilization. So Maulana Karenga decided, well, I will root my new holiday in this ancient civilization. So he named it Kwanzaa, and Kwanzaa means first fruits in the Swahili language. Swahili language is a mixture of African languages, Arabic, Portuguese, and Persian, and some Chinese thrown in. It's a new language, but it is a very rich language. And until today, it is spoken along that whole coast with newspapers, movies, and everything in Swahili. So he chose that area of Africa to be the homeland of his brand new holiday. Well, the problem that he encountered was, is it going to be an ethnic holiday, a racial holiday, or a religious holiday? Well, Karenga was a rather interesting person, strongly influenced by people like Malcolm X and Elijah Muhammad, the Nation of Islam, the Black Muslims, who said that African Americans should get rid of these white man holidays. Get rid of this white Jesus and Peter and Paul and Mary, and go back to Islam, which was a religion of non-whites. Prophet Muhammad was an Arab from Arabia. He was dark-skinned. And so Malanga agreed that this new holiday should reject Christianity. But he also realized that the majority of African Americans were Christian. They were Baptists, they were Methodists, many of them were Catholics or Presbyterians or whatever. Some had converted to Islam. But he's realized that if he was going to make a new holiday, it had to appeal to all African Americans, whether they were Catholic or Protestant or Muslim. So he created a holiday which was non-religious, meaning it was not associated with Islam or Christianity or Judaism or Islam or Buddhism or Hinduism. It was a religion that all people could identify with. No matter what church they went to on Sunday, during the week, they could celebrate Kwanzaa. And so this new holiday returned to Black culture. It returned to Africa, and it rooted itself not in Christianity or Islam or any other religion, and it became an ethnic holiday for Black people. Very much associated with Black power, meaning we are not whites, we are not yellows, we are Blacks. Our origins are in Africa, and we should look to Africa for the roots of our identity. Many books have been written on this Black nationalism, saying African Americans, although they speak English, their ancestors did not come from England. Although they are Christians, their ancestors did not come from Rome or Germany. Even if they are Muslims, their ancestors did not come from Saudi Arabia. And so it was very much a return to Africa, rooting this new holiday firmly into African culture. Well, the holiday itself is rooted around 7 principles. Now, here again, these are not beliefs. They're not religious, although many of them have sort of a religious sounding effect. But still, a Jew, Christian, Muslim, an atheist, anybody could accept these 7 principles. The first one is unity, umoja, meaning unity in the family, unity in the African American community, unity in the nation of African Americans, and unity of Black people. So it should reaffirm the unity of Blacks, no matter what language you speak, no matter what religion you attend, you are part of an African community. Self-determination. Here again, we define ourselves. We will write our history. We will choose our names, as Ron did when he adopted an African-sounding name. We will not let white people or anybody create our identity or speak for us. We will take control of our own writing of history and identity. Collective work and responsibility, meaning we are not just a bunch of individuals, but we belong to a community. We are our brothers and sisters of everybody else who is Black, and we have a responsibility to them. Don't go running to the government every time you have a problem. Take care of it within the African American community. Cooperative economics, very important, recognizing that if you are going to have any type of independence, you have to be economically independent. And so he called upon African Americans to open your own stores, shops, and other businesses. Organize your own banks to keep the money within the community. Don't go to a store that's owned by an Arab or a Pakistani or a Jew or a white person. Open up your own stores, your own shops. Keep the money within the community. Put it in a Black-owned bank, and that bank will lend it to Black businesses. The next principle is purpose, to make our collective vocation the building and developing of our community. We were once a great community. We have to dedicate ourselves to, as Donald Trump would say, make us great again. We were once great when we were the kingdoms in Africa. Now we have to work together to make African Americans great again. Creativity. We must create artists. We must cultivate musicians so that our community will be noted for its beauty, for its artistic creativity in music, in dance, in the arts. And finally, imani, faith, to believe with all our hearts in our people. Once again, this is faith, but not faith in God. God's not going to come out of the clouds and solve all of our problems, he argued. We have to have faith in ourselves, in our parents, our teachers, our leaders, and we can accomplish great things. So once again, these 7 principles are the type of principles that could be applied by any person. You could be a Muslim, you could be a Catholic, you could be a Mormon, a Seventh-day Adventist, you could be an atheist, and you could still subscribe to the 7 principles of the Kwanzaa ideology. 7 symbols. Every holiday has to have symbols. One is mazo, the fruits, the nuts, and the vegetables, because remember, Kwanzaa is celebrated in the winter after the harvest has been brought in. And so gourds and pumpkins and other plants are part of the holiday. Also recognizing the lush gardens and forests of Africa. It is all placed on a placemat, which is made out of grass woven from the plants of Africa. An ear of corn, recognizing that the African Americans live in America. We are now in America, and corn was domesticated by the Native American Mayas and Aztecs. 7 candles, one which is lit each day of the holiday. Here you see the influence of Judaism and the Advent candlestick of Christians. The kinara is the candle holder, which is made out of wood, very often wood from Africa. The cup, the unity cup, where they all drink to the unity. Once again, reminiscent of Jewish and Christian rituals of the drinking of from a common cup. And the giving of gifts, the final holiday. Once again, you can't have a holiday without fun. So kids have to get gifts or else they're going to fall asleep and drift away and play video games. So you have to keep them there with the promise of gifts, a new laptop, new sneakers, new clothes, a new video game or something. Husbands and wives exchange gifts. So holidays have to be fun or they will never succeed. Now, the official colors of Kwanzaa are red, black, and green. This has a long history in African American movements in the United States. It was Marcus Garvey here in New York who declared himself the provisional president of African Americans around the world. And he created the three-colored flag: one God, one aim, one destiny. The red for the blood of the slaves and Africans shed by white people, black for the skin of Africans, and green was for the jungle wealth of Africa. He established the Universal Negro Improvement Association in the late 1800s and early 1900s, and tried to organize African Americans, especially in New York and the United States, as well as his native Jamaica, the Caribbean, to get organized, get educated, get economically independent, and establish your own government. And so these three colors, which he instituted as the official flag of African Americans, remains very powerful in the movement of Kwanzaa. Now, the next question they had to decide was, when is this holiday going to be celebrated? Just like Christians decided that the birth of Jesus was going to correspond with the Roman pagan holiday of Saturnalia, because all the pagans were having fun and the Christians were not. So Karenga had to decide, when is this holiday going to be? Well, in the United States, by the 1960s, there was a holiday season, which began with the Thanksgiving parade down 8th Avenue and Broadway, organized by Macy's department store. And as we all know, the last float in that parade is Santa Claus. So with the ending of Thanksgiving dinner, the American holiday season begins. Beginning already on the day following Thanksgiving, Black Friday, the shopping marathon begins. Shop until you drop. Well, then Christmas holiday comes around, and all of the festivities and church goings and everything of Christmas. Then there was the week until New Year's. So you had basically from Thanksgiving until New Year's one giant, almost never-ending holiday season. Well, I have chronicled this emergence of an American holiday season in a YouTube video, which I did, called Christmas, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, which shows that there were other holidays added. Hanukkah became part of this. The winter solstice became part of this. And so you had this ever-growing holiday season. It seemed everybody wanted to have a holiday during this season. In fact, this wonderful video, which I did, is on YouTube. If you want to copy down the address, you can find it. And it really chronicles how this holiday season emerged and how Kwanzaa joined this holiday season in the 1960s. And it stretched from the day after Christmas until New Year's. So there was a week that seemed to be free of any holidays. And so Karenga said, well, we'll put our new holiday in this hole between the end of Christmas and New Year's. Once again, arbitrary decision. He decided to do it. So Kwanzaa ended up as a 7-day holiday. Well, all kinds of activities had to be created to fill up these 7 days. See Kwanzaa Live Music Week, where groups would perform music. They would invite African musicians to come over from Africa. They would share traditions with Haitians and Dominicans and Brazilian of African heritage. Music became a very important part of the holiday. All kinds of printable games were drawn up for kids to get them involved in Kwanzaa activities. Once again, if it's not fun, nobody's going to celebrate the holiday. Some cities started organizing Kwanzaa festivals, sometimes even before the actual time of Kwanzaa, where they would have African American singers and dancers and all kinds of activities going on. Of course, they were generally African themed activities: music from Africa, dancing from Africa, drum recitals, poetry readings, writers and poets from Africa and among the African American community would be invited on stage and asked to participate in this wonderful week of festivities. Well, of course, when the COVID hit, a lot of these activities had to go virtual. But yet, you could watch them on YouTube. They had lectures on Zoom and other activities. Here you see live entertainment, cultural performances, history, origin of Kwanzaa, and more. And this was in Miami with, of course, a telephone number to find out what was going on. And you can see this was sponsored by Mayor Rodney Harris, the mayor of, I guess it was Miami or in California. So gradually, political leaders started getting involved, especially if they were Black. They had to get involved. They had to sponsor activities. It costs a fortune to bring a group of dancers from Africa to the United States to perform. I mean, this took big effort at fundraising. But when you have an entire week, well, you have an obligation to fill it with African American oriented activities. Well, like every holiday, every holiday undergoes a slow process of evolution. For example, Thanksgiving was just a local holiday in Massachusetts, not celebrated anywhere else. Most Americans didn't even know about it until Abraham Lincoln adopted the holiday, saying this is a perfect holiday to unite all Americans. What do we eat during Thanksgiving? American food: turkey, cornbread, cranberry sauce, potatoes, sweet potatoes, pumpkin pie. Can't get more American than all of that. Well, his goal was, following the Civil War, it was necessary to create new holidays that would forget the Civil War, would drag Americans back into the unity of being Americans. No matter what side of the Civil War you fought on, when it turned to Thanksgiving, you were all Americans again. Well, some African American holidays have had success in becoming federal holidays. For example, Martin Luther King's Day was recognized by Ronald Reagan in 1983 as a federal holiday. Now, this means that banks are closed, the post office is closed, most schools are closed. This is a federal holiday. It is the third Monday of January. So Martin Luther King was recognized as a national holiday. Kwanzaa is still in the process of being recognized. In 1997, President Clinton, who was a great supporter of African Americans, created a stamp devoted to Kwanzaa in 1997. And he delivered a message on December 22 on the observance of Kwanzaa. Well, this began a tradition that governors, mayors, and presidents have continued ever since, that when Kwanzaa comes along, the president gives a speech. He makes mention of this holiday. And so this is sort of the beginning of the process of Kwanzaa becoming a national holiday. Now, not all holidays are national. St. Patrick's Day is not a national holiday. The banks don't close. Even if everybody skips work and everybody skips school to go see the parade, it is still not recognized as a national holiday like Labor Day or the 4th of July. So the process of becoming a recognized national holiday is very, very long. Various mayors, for example, have started putting up Kwanzaa candlesticks in front of public buildings. For example, Mayor Eric Adams, mayor of New York City, gave a speech and he said, as we celebrate the 7 principles of Kwanzaa, I think all New Yorkers have in this difficult year exhibited the principles of Imani, or faith. Faith in one another, faith in our collective courage and strength, faith that our greater joy is yet to come. So here again, we have a mayor not declaring it a public holiday, but recognizing that it is an important holiday and that it does have a message that is of importance not just to African Americans, but to all Americans. Byron, mayor of Buffalo, New York, made a statement where he said, where he declared that his family was wishing a happy Kwanzaa to other families, whether they were African American or anything else. A statement by the president and first lady: every year the president must give a greeting to Kwanzaa. Now, the president does the same thing for Jewish holidays, for Christian holidays, for Hindu holidays. This is a presidential tradition, but it recognizes that Kwanzaa has joined with the other major American holidays, and presidents, governors, and mayors have to acknowledge it. Governor Andrew Cuomo gave his message, wishing all those who celebrate the best during the Kwanzaa holiday for a future filled with peace and hope for all humanity. Happy Kwanzaa. So this is sort of another step in the path to recognizing Kwanzaa as a major American holiday. Governor Williams' statement in celebration, and he says, I wish a joyous Kwanzaa to all. This honor honors the richness of African-American culture and heritage, each day uplifting one of the 7 principles. Here again, another statement by a political leader recognizing the importance of the holiday. Another way that the holiday is recognized is when governors or mayors or even presidents have their proclamation printed in an official document. This is the one we see, State of New York Executive Chamber Proclamation. Very legalistic with all of the whereas, with the seal of the governor, his signature. Here again, officially recognizing Kwanzaa as a major holiday. Now, of course, I'm sure if he wouldn't do that, he would probably lose a lot of African American votes. That sort of goes without saying. This is American politics. You have to do the same thing on St. Patrick's Day. You have to do the same thing on Salute Israel Day. You have to do the same thing on the Muslim holiday parades of Fifth Avenue. I mean, this is part of the American political rhetoric. And Kwanzaa is now part of this. So that brings us to an end of our discovery of the importance of the holiday of Kwanzaa. It has become part of the American cultural, political reality, and it has joined the many other holidays, whether they are religious, whether they're political, whether they are ethnic, whether they are historical, that make up the calendar of American holidays. Very often, Kwanzaa is now listed in books such as the Encyclopedia of American Holidays and National Holidays. And that's only volume 1. In the middle, that's me in front of the Apollo Theater in the middle of Harlem when I was researching my book on the right, Into the Soul of African American Harlem. There you see the Apollo Theater. Well, Harlem is rapidly changing. It is now becoming more white than it is African American. It is being gentrified. Many of the smaller buildings we see in the picture on the cover are no longer there. They're being replaced with giant, super expensive skyscrapers. But the whole movement of civil rights, African American Renaissance continues. And the holiday of Kwanzaa is very, very much a part of African American history and African American culture. So, if you have anything you'd like to add, or criticisms or comments, feel free to contact me at ronbrownmedia@gmail.com, and I will respond. I always love comments and feedback from people. So this is Dr. Ronald Brown, thanking you for joining me in this exciting exploration of African American history. And I hope to see you sometime in the future when we all will explore another topic of history, culture, religion, politics, who knows what. There are enough topics to go around. So thank you for joining me, and I hope to see you in the future.